make it.
This is a really special Recovery Month event. We're coming to the conclusion of Recovery Month, which is September. Every year, SAMHSA created Recovery Month about 35 years ago. And I know it's played a huge part of my own personal recovery, and we couldn't be more thrilled to continue to build out celebration for recovery across the country. My name is Kristen Harper, and I am a woman in long-term recovery. And for me, that means that I've been practicing abstinence-based recovery since 2001. And I'm very grateful that the arts have played such a huge part of my healing and recovery process over the past 23, 24 years almost. Today, the Art of Recovery discussion, we are joined by some incredible panelists. I can't wait to get out of the way and turn it over to our facilitator, who's one of my sheroes and has been for many years. I do want to just quickly go over some housekeeping tech information in case you have any questions about the Zoom webinar format. We have moved to a webinar platform because of the size of the registrations for this particular webinar. It was quite large, so there are some limitations that come with that. So your microphones as participants are muted and your cameras will be off for the duration of the webinar. This helps minimize the background noise and distractions since we have quite a large number of attendees today. There is a Q&A section at the bottom of your menu. We please encourage you to ask questions during the presentation, and we will make sure that we feed those questions to our facilitator and to the panelists as well. You can type your question at any time. We will address it as many possible throughout the conversation today. If you would like to ask your question anonymously, you can also do that too. There is a selection button in the Q&A box where you can select anonymous question. The chat function is also not available for today's webinar. We are recording, so this session will go on SAMHSA's website and will also go on our Office of Recovery website at SAMHSA. And then if you need to leave the webinar anytime, feel free to. You can just click the leave button at the bottom of your screen. We are so grateful that you're spending a Friday afternoon with us. Well, we have people from all over the world, so it might be in the morning, could be evening, but we are really grateful for your time today. And I'm excited to get us started by introducing a dear friend and colleague for many years, Ariel Britt, who is just an amazing conversationalist and is quite accomplished in her own right. She is the creator of the award-winning podcast, Beauty in the Grit. She's an exceptional speaker with a passion for community and service. Most of her career has been focused on developing prevention, intervention, and recovery support services for youth and young adults. She also served as a political appointee for the Biden-Harris administration at the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. Erin received her bachelor's degree in psychology and master's in social work from the University of Michigan. We won't hold it against her, but please help me welcome Erin. Erin, over to you.
Thank you, Kristen. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank y'all for joining us to have this important discussion on the intersection and the power of arts and recovery. So most folks call me Air. I'm a woman in long-term recovery. And for me, that means I've been practicing abstinence-based recovery since November 6, 2011. So it's coming up on 13 years, which is super surreal. And also too, without art, without being able to use storytelling to share my own experience and help others, I don't know where I'd be. So this is such an important subject to me. And so I'm looking forward to moderating this discussion. And as art is, let's let it be messy. Let's go off script. Let's have a good time. Let's be vulnerable, all the good things that art brings. So before we do that, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, the director of the Office of Recovery at SAMHSA, Paolo Del Vecchio. So Paolo's been at SAMHSA for over 30 years in a variety of roles, including the director of the Center for Mental Health Services and the Office of Management, Technology, and Operations. So he and his team at the Office of Recovery have been super busy over the past 2 years since it was established. So we're going to let him kind of tell us what they've been up to and hear more from his experience in that role. Paolo, over to you.
Thank you so much, Air. And let me thank all of our presenters and panelists on the session today. Thank you all for joining in this important conversation about art and recovery. I am also a person in long-term recovery. I identify as October 11th, 1985, as when I began my journey from mental health addictions and trauma. And so this October 11th will be 39 years for me. And at SAMHSA, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, our mission is to lead public health and service delivery efforts that promote mental health, prevent substance misuse, and provide treatments and supports to, in fact, foster recovery while ensuring equitable access and better outcomes. Office of Recovery, which I'm privileged to lead, and a shout out here to Kristen Harper, who's helping to lead this particular effort as part of our team. Our overall goal and mission is to, in fact, advance recovery across the nation. We know that recovery is real and possible, and happy Recovery Month to everyone. In fact, what we know is that there are over 60 million Americans in recovery, according to data that we collect on an annual basis. What that says is that recovery is real, recovery is common. In fact, over 70% of us who have these conditions identify as being in recovery. So recovery is common. Recovery should be the expectation. And in fact, there are many of us. And we also know that there are many pathways to recovery, with the arts being one that many, in fact, choose, and one that I choose myself. Not only am I a person in recovery, but I also consider myself an artist and a musician. And what I've done through my art and my music has helped me in my own personal journey of recovery to find the healing and hope that, in fact, enables me to get up every day and overcome the mental health and addiction issues that I've faced. And that's a story for many of us. And that's what we're going to hear about during today's session. So let me just end there and thank everyone for putting a spotlight on recovery, putting a spotlight and celebrating the many strengths and pathways that we as people find to find that hope and healing. Air, back over to you.
Thank you so much, Paolo. We're super grateful to have you at the helm. So now the fun part, we get to introduce our panelists. First up, we have Emmy Award winner, Tony Award nominee, and highly successful producer, Hank Azaria, James Beard Award nominated chef and famed restaurateur, Jose Salazar, internationally known theater director, writer, and artistic director, Sean Daniels, and the founder and executive director of the International Art Mind Lab Center for Applied Neuroaesthetics at Johns Hopkins University for School of Medicine, Dr. Susan Magsamen. So thank y'all for being here. This is so exciting. My hope is that we can kick it to Jose first to kind of introduce himself, and we'll go through the list. Jose, thank you for squeezing us into your busy schedule. I know you have to hop off early. And so first, just tell us about yourself. I may ask a follow-up question or we'll kick it to somebody else, but just really sharing about who you are and your connection to this topic. Oh, you're muted.
All right, how's that? All right, cool. Yeah, what an honor. Thanks for having me. I am super stoked to be included in this amazing panel. So a little bit about myself, grew up in New York City, well, Queens specifically, and I'm actually back in Queens, just flew in from Cincinnati, where I live now. I am in my old neighborhood of Corona right now as I'm about to go meet some family members. I'm a chef, like you all already mentioned. I've been cooking for 25, 26 years now. I am just as excited about my craft today as I was 25, 26 years ago. I have been in recovery for coming up on 6 years. October 20th will be 6 years. I'm super proud of that, and excited to delve into this conversation.
Wonderful. So I guess I'll hit you with a follow-up question, if that's okay. So when you talk about food and using it as an expression, is there an emotional connection to it? What are you finding out right now in your journey in the intersection of food and your recovery and art? And how has that kind of shifted as your recovery has grown and changed?
Yeah, certainly. Well, I use food as therapy. Um, and really, if I'm in the kitchen, that's where I'm my happiest and my most relaxed. And that's a big part of what helped me on my journey to recovery. And today still, if I'm feeling a little stressed out or having a bad day, I go in the kitchen and I scramble some eggs or whatever it is, even the simplest of meals. And I just feel the sense of comfort. And then as far as my creative process, since I've been in recovery, that I've just felt this heightened sense of creativity. I feel like I'm more focused and more able to dedicate myself to being a better chef. And so I think I've benefited a lot from being in recovery. I feel like my food is better than it's ever been.
I love that. It can be simple, right? The eggs, just something that you can do. I love that. We're going to move on to Sean and introduce Sean here to the screen. Tell us about you. I hope folks can hear me okay. Can you hear me all right, Sean?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay, great. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you all so much. So I was just saying, if I make it to October 12th, I will have 13 years. Always the fun story I love to tell is that and by fun, I mean it's terrible, but that I wanted to take my own life on October 12th, 2011, and instead of doing that, I called my mother, with whom I did not get along with at the time, and by whatever you believe in, it was my mother's 1-year anniversary of getting sober. I did not know that she was trying. I did not know any of that, but she was walking home from her meeting of getting her 1-year chip, and I called her. And so to this day, we have the same sobriety date, just 1 year apart. And we always joke that if someone goes off the wagon, then we both have to go off the wagon, which nobody laughs at, but we find really funny. So since that time, I've really dedicated myself to using the arts to try to battle addiction, to try to change national narratives, to figure out how do we, as a people, understand, or why do we believe the things that we believe in. And I've been very lucky to be able to work with different organizations that also support just getting stories out. I wrote a play called The White Chip that Hank was a producer of. That played in New York, and we'll talk about it a little bit later, but after every performance, somebody came up and said that they were ready to get help, and that really, really moved us. And then I'm able to work with an organization called Live Tampa Bay, and I do a program there where we geo-target stories on social media into neighborhoods to make sure that people see recovery stories from people that look like them. Social media may have destroyed democracy, but it is really great for getting in the exact stories that you want to people, to make sure that they see what it is that they can relate to. And we did a test pilot of it for 8 weeks, and we had 14 million impressions in 8 weeks of people watching stories of recovery. So I think that shows that if you get the right story to the right people, they're ready for it. And for me, that's all the arts, right? That's storytelling. That's our oldest art form is people. Put it towards how we figure out how to help each other.
Absolutely. And Sean, we're litter mates. That's so cool. 2011.
Yeah.
I've been really passionate about reducing stigma. And I think that's what we're seeing and we're coming up against. Kind of in that process too, maybe even sharing your own story and knowing that that's probably helps people. What do you kind of find as the biggest success and challenge in that process of figuring out what the right story is to share, you know, depending upon that? How does that come to you?
You know, we all know that representation matters, but sometimes we don't know exactly how deeply that is. And I think, you know, for when we did the White Chip, just to see a joyous show about recovery, for people to be able to come in and watch something that doesn't feel, after school especially, doesn't feel overly serious, is hopefully joyful and funny, and that people can, because if you've ever actually been to a great AA meeting, it's like a rock concert. Like, people tell stories about the time that they like stole police helicopters and the room roars, right? Because it is a level of feeling less alone in that moment and feeling like you thought you were really trapped and you were the only person. I mean, I thought I was the only person that couldn't hold my liquor. And so to find out that vast majorities of other people are there, like, it's so relieving. And so I feel like that's where laughter comes from. And I think, you know, with our anti-stigma program, I mean, representation matters in just the most basic sense that, you know, Tampa Bay is a big area. Different people live in different parts. And so to make sure that when you go on social media, you see people that look like you telling you stories, and that's not just race, that's also socioeconomics, that's also gender, that's, you know, there are parts of town that are old and white, there are parts of town that are full of drag queens. And we need to make sure that, like, if you're in either of those groups, you see people talking about how they were once in your place and now they're on the other side. And that, I think, encourages people to watch more.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. And all my identities, you're speaking my language, that's so important. And I think you're right too. I remember getting my laugh back in recovery. I had like this big boomy laugh and I didn't even realize that I was missing that, to have that connection. And it doesn't have to be, we often see the loudest narrative be around that negative, fear-mongering version. And so just the work that you're doing, that we hear other people doing too, to bring that story of hope and laughter and connection in a different way is so vital. So thank you so much. We're going to move to Hank, who's beside you. Hi, Hank. I can't see him.
Can you see me?
No,
Somehow
I
moved off
can't.
camera. We're in tech difficulties, I think.
There we
here
go.
I'm
There
back.
he is.
Hello.
Okay. Hi, how are you, sir? How's it going?
I'm good. I'm very glad to be here. Glad to be invited.
Thank you for taking the time. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've got 18 years of sobriety, about 25 years in the Al-Anon program. I started there. I started as much more worried about the other drunks and addicts in my life than myself. Discovered I had my own problem about 7 years into that, and was a relatively high-bottomed drunk and drug addict. I think a lot because I had seen so much as an Al-Anonic caretaker and was raised in the disease and kind of knew what I would be in for if I kept going. And gratefully stopped. It wasn't easy. I've had bottoms in other programs too. I'm sort of, I qualify for almost every program I know. And I've spent at least a little bit of time in many of them as I address food as an issue and other things as well. And I'm very grateful to the recovery community. It's just such a part of who I am now, that I kind of happily can't really, I remember what it was like. I mean, we all tell what it was like, what happened and how it is now. But I'm very glad that I have harder and harder time relating to what it used to be like, relying on substances and booze to get through. And started talking about it publicly. I got kind of called to do it. Basically felt like the good outweighed whatever bad there might be. We're encouraged, at least in 12-step programs, to not talk about it publicly. But really, I'm gonna get into this today, perhaps later, but I went through this there was a lot of controversy over one of the characters I do on The Simpsons. I'm most known probably for voicing The Simpsons. I've been in a lot of films and TV shows and produced over the years. And I did the character of Apu, the voice of Apu, the Indian Quickie Mart attendant. There's a lot of public outcry over a white guy doing this stereotypical voice of a cartoon character and how that was very marginalizing. And in looking into whether I should stop doing that voice or not, which I eventually did, that brought me into a whole world of discovering social justice and racism and representation issues in Hollywood. And because I was asked to be so public about that, I couldn't tell that story without including recovery, because it was the model of recovery of my foundation is called the 4 through 9 Foundation. Steps 4 through 9. Step 4 in this context meaning, how am I personally accountable? What's my part? And then step 9 being, well, how could I make amends? Then how do I make this up if in fact I did have a part? So when folks ask, why did I stop? Why'd you stop doing the voice of Apu? I'm like, well, therein lies the tale, and it involves what I consider personal accountability to be, which I can't separate out recovery from that. And that's a lot of why I began speaking publicly about recovery.
Well, thank you for that courage. That's not easy, I'm sure, but you're right. I think when you live by a new set of principles, right, which what it sounds like within your recovery, things change. I'm navigating that myself, right? And I think a lot of us are, even just claiming that I am an artist at times, it can be difficult, right? But how do I integrate all aspects of myself? So something that also really stuck out in what you were saying is that you have a new definition of your recovery now. You don't identify the same as your substance use and other issues, right? So what is your definition of recovery today?
An interesting question. I do have one. These are just my beliefs. I started in the Al-Anon program. Started looking at first, believe it or not, my drinking and using, the uptick in it was a little bit of progress for me. Because for the first time in my life, I was putting myself first and asking, well, how can I enjoy myself as opposed to taking care of everybody else? And one of those things I discovered that I liked was drinking and using. Not surprisingly, that became first a little problem and quite a big problem after a while. And I had to stop. And I stopped in AA. And that wasn't easy. Both those bottoms, my Al-Anonic bottom, my codependent bottom, and my AA bottom were very different, but very, very difficult emotionally, psychologically for me. I have now landed in a place, I feel my home program really is adult children of alcoholics. I was raised in an addicted environment. And what I really most relate to is connecting why I drank, why I was a codependent caretaker. I tend to look at my behaviors as sort of different expressions of the same core problem of coping skills, survival traits I picked up as a kid. One of those was drinking and using, another was codependency, another was workaholism, another was food addiction, kind of you name it. I see sort of my core disease, if you will, if that's the right word, is the center, and then those addictive behaviors like spokes on a wheel coming out. And I think any active addiction like alcoholism, like I had, needs to be addressed urgently if that's where you're at. But then after a while, for me, I'm not cured. I never graduate out of that personality type. That's how I'm built. And so I need to, like a diabetic needs insulin, or a car needs gas, or a plant needs to be watered every day, I need to connect with others. I find that the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety, it's connection, and connection with others. And the most profound connection I find in my life is the truth about my own shame and disease and the problems I encountered. And so I have to have that in my life, and I've been able to express it now publicly as well.
Have to have the truth. Thank you so much, Hank. I appreciate it. Now we're going to go to Susan. Hi, Susan. How are you doing?
Get myself off there we go. Can you hear me?
Yay. I can hear you good. You got a
Great.
good speaker. Thank you so much for being here. I'd love to hear more about you and your connection to this. And then, of course, a question will come.
Yeah. Well, thank you, first of all, for having me. This is really a very poignant and meaningful discussion, and hearing everyone's stories. And I really, right time, right moment. You know, it made me think a lot about just some of the things that are happening in my family's life and my life, and how all of that sort of comes into play. Let me maybe step back and just give you a little bit about my background. So I'm at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and I have always studied the arts, arts and learning, and then arts and health, arts and mental health, and have been very interested in this from the time I was a little kid, understanding sort of what was it about story and about sharing our voices in different ways beyond the rhetoric of speaking that allowed us to find our deepest knowings and our deepest understandings. And that ultimately for me became a career in being a translational researcher, looking at the role of the arts and how they change our brains, bodies, and behavior, and how knowing that in many ways, whether it's neurophysiologically, psychologically, ancestrally, through indigenous cultures, through artists, and I also lived experience, how can you know those new ways of knowing, or those collective ways of knowing, how can you use those to help address our individual needs and recovery? But also how can that be manifested in healthcare or mental health or education systems and things like that. And so a couple things that, you know, I think, you know, lifting up, and a lot of the things that were just said, I sort of am sort of tying back into some of the work that we've done. And I think, Hank, you talked about this idea of you need connection. And, you know, like, you know, there's a causality around what each of us need that really is essential. And I think it's neurophysiological. And so when I think about art and recovery, you know, there are neurotransmitters that are released, thinking of dopamine or oxytocin, even opioids that are naturally occurring opioids in our bodies, that when we're doing repetitive motions, or when we're working with clay, or when we're engaged in dance or movement, or when we're singing and we're activating the parasympathetic nervous system, there's a huge physiological neurochemical change that happens that gives us some of the things that we might have needed when we've looked for them in other ways that have maybe not been good for our biology or good for our spirit, and not helped us. And so I'm very interested in at that intersection. And you know, I think there are all kinds of you know, ways that we find to cope with the complexities of our lives. And I think the arts as a daily practice, as a prevention, and as an intervention, and as a way to connect and share stories, we always come back to that. And I think it's because it's our birthright. We're physiologically wired for the arts. We cannot look away from the fact that the only way we know the world and ourselves is by bringing it in through our sensory systems and connecting those 100 billion neurons that create strong neural pathways. And sensory inputs can be really good for us, and they can be really bad for us, right? So how do we create those sacred, enriched environments that we need, and they change, right? They change all the time. So, I think about recovery. I also think about flourishing. We want to heal and we also want to grow. And so the way that these experiences weave through our lives offer redemption in terms of healing and in flourishing, and also the ability to be able to move outside of all of that to imagination and creativity. And, I think both Sean and Hank spoke to this, and Jose, you too, is that, you have go-tos, right, that move you to other places, and they're transportive, they're transformative, they're not transactional. And I think the arts are by nature, alchemy and transformative. And we all need that. And, so maybe I'll stop there, but I think this is just such a beautiful reminder of how we make and behold all the time. And it's an improv. It's always an improv, right? It can't be anything but that. So we don't control a lot. Ambiguity is with us all the time. And how do we navigate the fear of that, and the fear of ambiguity and complexity, when our bodies are also different, right? Some of us are attracted to food, some of us are attracted to work, some of us are attracted to different types of drugs or alcohol. We are all different, but it seems like the arts come forward, and we pick our art, but it has that ability to match us in all these different ways. So I think it's sort of the closest thing to a miracle.
Okay, Susan, my heart is so warm.
I'm sorry.
You know, don't stop. You should see, I don't know if you see the hearts just popping up.
Oh, no, I didn't.
Popping up. Oh
Whoa,
my
whoa.
gosh, there's so many hearts going. So thank you so much for that. Art is our birthright. It's a need. I think that is so powerful. And so as a person that loves science and the heart of everything, clearly that intersection is so important to you. When you talk and you think about daily practice, what is something that someone can maybe do? Just, oftentimes we think, oh, I have to create this big art project or this massive meal, but just to get those receptors or whatever the brain things are kind of firing in that moment, in that critical moment, or even just if they're feeling a lull. What are you seeing in your research or in your experience that can just get those things firing?
Well, I'm going to take that question in two different ways. The first is something that I call the aesthetic mindset, and it's four things. One is curiosity, being open to being curious. And, we have become so transactional that we're not looking about the why, looking around the corner. We just kind of put our heads down, we go. So curiosity. The second is playful exploration. And that's moving into things with a beginner's mind and really playing around without any kind of expectation. I don't know if you guys have a checkbook or a work list where you're checking the box, right? How do you just play around? And, the opposite of play is not depression. Sorry, the opposite of play is not work, it's depression. And I think when you really think about how we play with stuff and mess around with it, there's so much great language around play. And the third is sensory experiences. What's the room look like? What does it smell like? What's the temperature? What are you feeling from these sensory? What does it smell like? I mean, listen, I love food. And when I was listening to Jose, I was like, oh my God, I can imagine the smells in his kitchen. They're transportive. And 70% of your emotions come from your olfactory, from your nose. And so, we have this amazing ability to feel the world through our senses. And then the last is being a maker and a beholder. So those are four things that we all can do without anything. It's affordable, it's accessible, and it's immediate. But then it's a couple simple things. Doodling. People that doodle actually retain information better. They actually are better listeners, and they pay attention and can have better memory than non-doodlers. Humming or singing activates your parasympathetic nervous system, immediately lowers cortisol by activating the vagus nerve. So you can calm your body down just by doing that. Movement, dancing, immediately changes your muscular, your respiratory, and starts to affect your endocrine and immune system. So these little things, drinking a cup of coffee, taking a walk in nature. Nature within 15 minutes moves you back into 15 minutes of being in nature where you're really intentionally in that space creates homeostasis. And I think one of the coolest things about art for me, who like all of you on here who are so talented, I'm really shitty at everything. I can't sing. I write really bad poetry. I dance like Elaine on Seinfeld. But it doesn't matter how good you are at it. You don't have to be proficient in order for you to have tremendous benefit. And so you said earlier, I have trouble calling myself an artist. I think we're all creative, we all have creative expression all the time, and that's art making, right? And so you don't need to be a professional artist, although God love them, you know, you don't want to hear a bad cello player, but if you are getting benefit from making and from experiencing, that's what matters. And we vilified, talk about stigma. We have stigmatized ourselves. If you're in third grade and you're not good at art, you're not creative, you don't go that way because you don't get any value for it. You know, there's no benefit for someone singing if they're not singing well. We don't glorify the imperfect. You know, we don't glorify the person who's just doing it because it feels good. And again, I want to come back to the fact that we're wired for it and it is our birthright. And we have abdicated. And in a weird way, we forgot this is who we are. So I think technology with AI is coming along and they are sensors. We are senses. And I think we're at a crossroad where some of this tension of opposites in terms of where we feel uncomfortable, where we or don't know what to do, we have to start to come back to what does it mean to be human? And it does mean that we break. It does mean that we recover. It does mean that we're vulnerable, but we're human and we're not machines. And I think that's the next chapter that humanity is really going to be facing. So how do we care for the soul? And how do we do that not only as therapy, which is wonderful, but the word therapy comes from the word care. So it's constant care and feeding of ourselves. And I don't know, I just think that that's really an important thing to remember as we give ourselves some grace.
Thank you so much, Susan. I'm going to be chewing on those words for a while. I really appreciate that. I know Jose has to jump, so I'm going to ask him to spotlight back in. A question came to me. Hi there, Jose.
Hi.
Hey. Okay, so when we think about recovery hostile environments and how that relates also to the arts, whether it's theater, or even also in the restaurant space, as a restaurateur, as a person in recovery, how do you navigate that or navigate creating that culture with the folks with your staff, with any of that? How does that work for you with yourself and with your team?
Well, I think shows like The Bear probably have shed a little spotlight on what it's like in our industry. And while it's a little exaggerated, there are a lot of truths to that. And addiction is very high in our industry. And so and mental health is a huge concern for people who work in restaurants. It's stressful, it's chaotic, it's all those things that you see, in these shows. And I think for us, the approach is to not necessarily try to tame that behavior, but find ways to use that as and turn it as a positive. And how can we, take that energy that people have, those stressors, and turn them into something that functions for what they want out of life. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think for so many people who work in restaurants, we're just so active, and we have this kind of can't shut down mentality, physically, mentally, emotionally. We're just sort of like always going. And there's nothing wrong with that. And so it's how do we harness that energy? What do we do to to say that this it's not bad. But oftentimes, people do turn to drugs and alcohol or abusive behaviors. And so I am, my goal in life right now is to try to educate people and say that, there is hope, there is ways to take that energy and find good positive outlets for it. I'm not as eloquent as Susan. In fact, Susan, I think that I hear AI is developing this feature where you can FaceTime someone and then you'll be able to smell through the telephone. Like AI will then transmit the smells. So I'll cook for you every day and then you talk to me and motivate me and educate me and we'll help each other out. So
I'm coming to see you.
I love it. I love it. Everybody's welcome. Everybody come see
I'm
me.
coming.
I'll
We're
cook.
coming. We're coming. Next meeting, it's together.
Yes, I'm in Michigan, so I'm super close. I'm pretty close to you, so that'll be great. And I think even what you're saying too, what's so awesome is you just sharing your experience, you having the success that you've had, and centering also your recovery. What an example, right? What an example for the culture in general, that it doesn't have to be a certain way in order to get successful. In fact, you said it yourself, because of your recovery, your craft has gotten even better. So that's just so powerful.
Absolutely. And I think, what's really important is someone mentioned vulnerability and being able to open up about it. It was hugely stigmatized in our industry. It was a sign of weakness to get help. In fact, the more you drank, the more drugs you did, the later you stayed out, the more the more people you slept with, the more abusive behaviors you were involved in. It was a badge of honor. It was touted as something to be proud of. And now we're starting to see a shift. And so that's what I am most grateful for is to see people being vulnerable and opening themselves up to this change that seems to have just kind of washed over everyone like a huge wave in the last several years. And I think COVID certainly exacerbated that or brought that more to the forefront. So I'm just feeling really happy. Of course, 60 million people in recovery, that's an outstanding number, but I think of how many aren't getting the help that they need. So I'm hopeful. I'm an optimist at heart, so I'm excited to see, how discussions like this can lead to even more change and more people getting the help that they need.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jose. Thank you so much. I'm gonna shift to Sean. Hi there. And there are some questions that are popping off in the chat, so I'm done making them up. I want people to be able to be heard. And the first one really came in for you regarding your play, White Chip, right? That's the name. Yes. I don't want to get it wrong. Okay.
No, that's correct.
People want to know if you're bringing that back. Or are you taking it anywhere else? They're excited.
So it was just announced this morning that it's going to go to London, and then hopefully from there come back. And I've never been to London where I didn't feel like everyone was drinking on the streets at 1 PM. So we'll see how the play is received when it's over there. And it's funny, we even before it happened in New York, there were some readings of the play in Scotland, and if God bless them, you think we have it bad. Addiction rates in Scotland and are through the roof. And actually at the reading that they did, they served beer and people brought beer into the reading because I think over there also beer isn't drinking. But it was okay, all right, I guess we're gonna meet people where they're at. We're gonna really some people are gonna come in and have a beer and watch it. And then it was very profound. Somebody else had brought their family because they wanted their family to better understand who they were. A mother had come because she had lost her son and she didn't understand why. And so she thought she would come to the play and maybe it would help to understand. And then there was also like 17 people drinking beer and laughing through it. And you realize like, oh, that is the power of the arts that we're talking about, that it really is this place where it's like the most democratic thing that happens, right? Is we all get together and we all laugh at the same time. And there's these great studies about how when you're in an audience, your heart beats at the same time as people who are in the audience with you. And if you've ever been to a great performance, right, everybody holds their breath at the same time. Everybody laughs at the same time. Or my favorite thing, when half the audience laughs, because it's a joke about like, you know, class, and like half of them don't understand what's so wrong with rich people and the other half really find it funny. So I just think it's the ultimate thing that brings us together. And I think I love hearing Jose talk, because I feel like the art industry is so similar, that like we love the Jack Kerouac story, that like he was brilliant, but it like he had to die young, and that was the cost of his art. And I feel like we've really baked that into what makes you a great artist. And it's not true at all. I think for so many of us, like our art is better after we got sober. And actually looking back, it's a bit shameful in terms of what it was. We thought we were at the top of our game, and you look back and you think like, oh God, that was sloppy. And yes, it had all the things of like the whole cast went out till 4 a.m, but did that really move people? So yeah, so the White Chip will continue. What I love about it is, you know, when you start doing theater when you're 22, you think it's the most punk rock thing. You think that you're going to change the world by doing theater, and along the way, you know, that gets lost a little, and you just try to keep subscribers by like having them be in the same seats they had last year, because that's what they want, and you really lose that passion. And so, but with this play, it really feels like we're back to having this punk rock attitude, that like we're going to put on a play and people's chemistry is going to be different when they walk out of there, and they're going to talk about it on the way home. I'm really lucky also, we're working with John Carr, who is an Oscar Award winner, and Palin Chow, who is an Oscar nominee. Palin brought her sons to come see the White Chip, and then her sons talked to her on the way home. I think similar to yours, like on the train ride home, they talked about it. She was like, you need to figure out how to do this show for teenagers. And I was like, this show is not for teenagers, but if it actually brings them to be able to talk about it more. So we're working on an animated short to figure out like, how can we take 10 minutes of it, or an inspired part by it, figure out like, how do we put it online so that you can find it at 4 a.m. when you need it? Because I think if it can't really change it, then we really need to figure out how can it be as accessible to everybody.
Fantastic. Hearts are popping off too. People are really excited. Hank, hi there.
Yes.
Hi again.
Hello.
After this question to tech team, can we put everybody on the screen? It'll just be nice after this question. But people are saying thank you so much for sharing your recovery journey. And they're curious about how you managed the behavior and attitudes of folks that were still living the life. Like, did they treat you differently? How did you navigate that? Just as you were navigating your recovery, how did people treat you after you left kind of the life that you were once having around your substance use?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I refer to those folks as drinking buddies, even though all of them weren't necessarily drinking buddies, but you lose some, you know, you lose a main common interest that you had. And I don't think anybody does it on purpose, but some folks it really makes uncomfortable. Some you realize, gee, our relationship was kind of based on how effed up we got together. And without it, there's not much else. And there's subtler codependent versions of drinking buddies, folks who I really only used to gossip with. You know what I mean? And that was sort of the base of our relationship, and that didn't feel right anymore. Folks who I was at work with who would be real abusive, you know, and I didn't really condone that or want to be around that anymore, or didn't have the ability to tolerate it so much anymore. If I was in my right mind and in my right thoughts and feelings, as I got more a serenity, as we say, the priceless gift of serenity became more and more important to me. Certain situations and folks weren't a good match for me anymore. And some of that was sad and lonely. You know, I miss some of those folks and they miss me. And sometimes it comes out real sideways, not direct at all. But when I look back on it, I realize, you know, plain and simple, what was going on there was in my sobriety, in my recovery, in my serenity, really wasn't the same person. And we didn't have as much common ground anymore. And I truly love some of those people. But you know, I used to see a shrink, a guy named Phil Stutz, who folks might know. Jonah Hill did a documentary about him, and he was a tremendous therapist. And he would always say to me, you know, at least by the way he put it was, at least by 51 to 49%, that recovery, that serenity, that peace has to be more important than anything else. You know, so in some ways I had to step out of some social and professional situations, but I really don't have any regrets about that. I just, bottom line is, I was much happier choosing a healthier folks, a healthier life, healthier lifestyle. It was scary though. It was scary at first.
Yeah, a lot of grief, right? I think too, you have that in between time sometimes too, before you find more of your recovery buddies versus your drinking buddies too. So always try to have so much grace with myself and with people that I talk to about that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, it'd be great to have all the panelists on the screen, just so, thank you so much. Thank you. I think okay, wonderful. Hi, everyone. A question that is coming to mind, and I think really ties in, people are really wanting to understand the intersection between your art and your spiritual practice and what that looks like. I know for me, when I put something out into the world that I really care about, or actually if I feel like I've channeled it and I'm putting it out in the world, there's like this afterburn that comes in, and I really have to find my center again. And it reminds me of like those big climax moments where like, oh, is this it? What's going on? Are people gonna love it? Da, 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 da. How do you navigate that, being experts in your field? How do you ground yourself in your art? And is there a spiritual practice that maybe you can share with us? And Jose, I know you have to go soon, so we'll kick it to you first again and then go to Susan, just so you can hop up if you need to right after that.
Sure. Spirituality is always, I think, interesting because, you know, we all look at it a little differently. And, you know, for me, nature is, I think, that one thing that does ground me and brings me back to center. So whenever I'm feeling like yes, like I've exerted every bit of energy that I have to give to the world, whether it be, you know, having a long work day, or being involved in helping others during their recovery. If I get out into nature, it helps inspire me and it helps ground me, and that is really my spiritual place. That is where I feel, next to being in the kitchen, I feel the most comfortable, and it actually helps inspire me to cook, because if I'm looking out at nature and I see the changing of the leaves, then suddenly it makes me think of some ingredient that I want to cook with that is of that season. So that's really, you know, being in, you know, taking a hike and you know, not having all these distractions and just the quiet, the serenity, you know, that we talk about. That for me is really the important thing that I need to remind myself to get out into nature more often.
Thank you, Jose. I love that. Nature is so important. Something that I've been doing myself recently is like, I became a mom about a year ago, and nothing like a little boy to ground you right where you need to be. He does not care what I'm putting out into the world. He just wants my cuddles. He wants my love. And so it's so funny too, in my recovery journey, how that changes. And even too, just being more truer to myself. I think, like many of us too, and 90% of folks that are in recovery have come from a traumatic environment. There's some trauma attached to that too. And so this idea of earning really got me out of my creativity. So to be able to come back to that truth, as Susan was so my birthright as a creative, and not feel that pressure. It's just so important to have those lenses, whether it's nature, a baby, a kid, or whatever, your friends, to see the truth is so important. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Susan.
And as you
Yeah. Oh yeah, Jose, yeah. Go ahead.
wanted to say thank you again, as I do have to step away. Thank you to Sean for the invite. Thank you all for having me. It was a real honor. Great to meet everybody. And sorry that I couldn't be here for the rest of it, but
No, the hearts are blowing up.
I'm really, really bummed actually that I have to run, because I've learned so much and I've been so inspired. And so thank you all very much.
Yes, I'm
care.
coming to
Bye.
Cincinnati with Susan.
Yeah.
Take care.
Please. Everyone's welcome.
Yes,
Yeah, I'm from
wonderful.
Queens too. I'm from Forest Hills.
Queens.
I'm from Corona. I'm in Corona right now.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome. All right. Be good, guys.
Bye.
Appreciate
Take
it
care.
all.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
All right, fantastic. Susan, we'll kick it to you in relation to that question: spirituality, groundedness, all of that. What are
Yeah.
you seeing with yourself or in the research?
So, you know, I coming back to that idea of these spaces that are ambiguous and liminal, and how in those moments of transition, we're always unsure, right, of what's going to happen. And Hank, I like the way you were talking about that and thinking about, you know, you're letting go of something, but you don't know what you're moving toward. But you've got to let go and move forward, and they don't always happen at the same time. And there's some really great work around ambiguity and listening and observing and being able to be in that sort of still, quiet moment. It's that pause moment where you can tolerate ambiguity. And the arts tend to be an area where you start to be able to move toward that other side of the liminal space. And you know, and that can happen in a number of art forms, depending upon, you know, what you gravitate to. For me, two things. One is, you know, when I really don't know, but I know I'm anxious and I'm really, and I haven't built muscle, you know, for that new space. And ambiguity is never the same all the time, right? You think, oh yeah, I'm used to tolerating it, but I'll use a situation where, as a family member who is primary for someone who's living not in recovery, if I don't hear from this kid for 10 days, I'm sure he's dead, right? I'm sure he's dead. You know, it's just a question of how dead is he, and, you know, how, you know, where is he? And that ambiguity is really, really hard. And, you know, one of the things that I find to be really helpful is journaling and writing and putting things down that I would never say out loud, because it would create a different kind of conversation that I don't want to have. But there's a lot of research around journaling and writing, expressing your feelings. Not if you ever, you don't have to ever share them, but the act of getting them out lowers cortisol and also gives you more cognitive bandwidth to be able to process and begin to understand things. So that's one thing. The other one, there's some really interesting research, but also something that I do is, because I'm not a visual artist. I collage because I know there's something going on. I don't know what that emotion is. You know, we have over 35,000 different kinds of emotions. Like we can never name them, you know, nor maybe would you want to. But when I collage, what those feelings are start to become symbols and metaphors. And then I can go, oh, that's it. Even the color or the thing that I choose to collage around or add to. And then I come back and I can make sense of it through a narrative, through a story. And so I think those are spiritual in that way. And then I'm a gardener, you know, I plant my garden, I weed my garden, it's seasonal. And I also come back to this idea that we are of nature. And so it doesn't make sense that you would be planting, you know, impatience in in November because you plant impatiens in May, right? Or, after the frost. And so just remembering that there's a time for everything and that there's a season and that we need to move more with the natural cycle of life and the world. And we are in nature. We're not us and then nature. And so I think gardens are also metaphors for me for the beautiful, and a million flowers bloom, and it's an ecosystem. And you have to nurture it. So there's lots of things within that for me that sustain me.
Thank you so much for that. I love that. Having that groundedness, that practice of the natural cycle of things is so important. Anchor Sean, gonna chime in, let y'all know who goes first.
Yeah, you asked about also like, what does it mean like when people perceive us to be kind of experts or leaders in our field? And I feel like that's such a, it's so tricky, right? Because when we talk about harm reduction and we talk about like, like what actually gets anybody sober, I don't think anybody ever knows. So I think it's like we have to, I'm always thinking about like what worked for me, would that work for Hank? Maybe not. How do we put together a program to encourage people? I mean, the problem with having a show like The White Chip is that you get contacted by a lot of people that are like, I have a cousin. Can you contact them? Can you send them the show? Can you tell them what you did? And you have to be like, I have no idea whether that will work for them. All I can do is the kind of attraction, not promotion of it, which is to say, like, here are the things I did. I have no idea if that would work for you. I'm so sorry. But, here are the things I did. And I can help you to find somebody that maybe is in a similar place to you. But it's such a personal journey. And we're all, we're so new to this that I think people perceive us to be experts in the field just because there hasn't been a big field for some time. We don't have decades worth of out sober people to be able to follow. It suddenly feels very new, even though, of course, this issue has been around forever. And so I think it's a really tricky place, I think, for everyone that's on this Zoom to figure out, like, how do we encourage other people without saying, this is the things that you do. Because I remember when I was in early sobriety, if I heard one wrong thing from somebody, I was like, well, there we go. And now I'm going off the deep end and it's your fault. Thank God you said, like I was so ready. I was looking for reasons for it not to work. I was looking for ways to have it not be my fault that I couldn't do it. And so I think it's, I think the level of humility that it takes to talk about, like, we're putting it out there, we're talking about it in a very public place. And I hope this works, but I don't know what works for you. And we can work together to figure out like how to connect you with people that are similar to you. But it's a very individual process of what it is that moves. And there's a whole conversation about California sober and other things like that, that for some people, I always feel like you should deal with the issues in your life in the order with which they may kill you. So if that keeps you alive for a little bit, then I think you should do that. And then we can figure out whether it continues to impact your life in negative ways. But for so many of us, right, it was short term, we would be dead if we didn't figure out how we got off of this elevator going down. And then what happens from that, and how do you, as Hank was talking about, then how do you build your life back up? How do you then build yourself around people that can help you to thrive from there?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for giving that image and building off of that ambiguity piece, right? I don't know what's best for you. And really, and sometimes that can feel really scary, but it's the truth, right? I just have to continue to learn what's best for me. And the longer I'm on this journey, you're so right. I don't know anything, but I can tell you my experience. And I'm grateful for that, right? I'm grateful for the capacity to be in that gray, right? Hank, what about you? What's on your mind?
Well, it's been an amazing conversation. A couple of things that come to mind based on what we're sharing. One is that, we call them hallway moments, where you've given up. Like, I used to drink, I don't do that anymore. I don't have much to replace it yet that gives me any joy or comfort. And so I'm freaking out. And that is a grieving process. And I was told that grieving is like a physical process. It takes like 9 to 12 months. And, for newly sober alcoholics, they're in general going to be pretty miserable for one reason or another, right? when I was coming out of my codependency recovery, I grieved the relationship that I was not in anymore, even though I knew it was toxic, but I desperately wanted to go back to it the same way a heroin addict knows the next fix will kill him, but he desperately wants that fix. So living through those uncomfortable emotions, beyond uncomfortable, very painful emotions, and getting support for that was the whole thing. And I didn't have, it was an act of faith, as they say in the rooms, that something someday was gonna land, gonna click, some coin was gonna drop that made me feel better, but I had to really just feel the feelings. I tell sponsees now, like every day that you feel miserable, it's not just, we call them productive tears in recovery. It's another day you can cross off the calendar of that wound healing, of that wound draining. But you have to stay with it and not go for the fake. Because, you know, that's not so easy. 8 months into that process, you still feel miserable some days. It's hard not to pick up or go back to that horrible relationship or have that whole pizza or whatever it is that you want that you think is gonna fix that feeling. The other thing I want to share about this artistic conversation and to that is the concept of one day at a time. You know, that's how I stopped drinking, right? I couldn't think about, oh my God, I'm never gonna have another martini the rest of my life. That would absolutely freak me out. I had to say, today I'm not gonna drink. Today I'm not gonna drink, and I got support in not doing that. It's gotta make it to going night-night without that martini today. And then same thing for getting over those relationships. I'm just not gonna call her today. I'm not gonna go by there today. I'm not gonna do that today. And same for all my recovery. And what I found shocking was the same went from my art and my work. Meaning, I came to realize that all I really have in my work, all I can control really, is how much I enjoy a day's work. And what Susan was saying about that really hit me. Whether the public loves it, whether it comes out great, even by my standards that day, is kind of out of my control. What I can control is how passionately I enjoy it, one day at a time. And in our industry, I won't even know what people think of it or how it comes out in like a year or two from now. And the same when I had to recover from worrying. Once I stopped drinking and using, my fear of the future was so intense that that's why I was using and eating and drinking and relationshiping like a nut. And, you know, I realized that one day at a time started to mean to me, and then I'll wrap this up, is I don't even know that I have tomorrow. I could get hit by a bus at 10 p.m. tonight. Do I want to spend it worrying about that bus, or do I want to spend it enjoying my day's work or the people around me or connecting? And so that one day at a time model came to apply to everything that I did, including my art. You know, I don't know where it's going to lead or where it's going to go, but I know what my love is of it in the moment. That's about all I know.
You know,
go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I had a fun story when I was in rehab. There was one girl who was very upset. And she said, are you telling me that I'm not gonna be able to drink champagne at my daughter's wedding? And her friend said, you don't even have a boyfriend. So like the idea was like that she had already gone ahead and thought into the future and created a scenario with which she couldn't be a part of it. And it was like such a breakthrough moment, because I was like, oh yeah, of course, she's already created 7 steps and put herself in a position where to not drink feels awful. And I think I think about the 2 of them all the time, because I do that. I've already worked out, you know, been sober for 12 years and I'm still like, oh God, are you saying that like when this happens, I won't get to celebrate in the way that I trained myself to celebrate for 2 decades? And it was like, okay, well, that's not happening today. So let's just worry about, you know, catching the train to make it home. So it's
That's
one
so
day at a
true.
time. I feel like it's the best message that we can pass on, because that's how anything happens, right? Writing, directing, that's anything. That's actually all you're doing, is just trying to do it for today.
I always wish the rear view mirror was bigger because I feel like I'd learn more, right? But the window in front of you is always so big and you're like, I don't know where to look, and you just got to like go for it. I'm downtown at a meeting for Hopkins today, which is why I'm in this very weird background. And I was on a panel talking about arts at Hopkins, and this one of the faculty members that I was talking with teaches a course called "You're Gonna Die. How do you want to live your life?" And she's a philosopher, and she told this great story today about how these kids come in and they're all worried about, being doctors, and they're all, on a career path that's like going to kill them, and they're all really stressed and they're all really anxious. And she's like, well, you're going to die. For sure, you're going to die. Somebody's going to, you can't outlive death. You're going to, so what do you want your life to mean? What do you want to stand for? How do you want to live your life? And she said, it's like this extraordinary experience where these kids don't think about that because they're so busy planning their lives and checking the box. And I think this idea of, what if you didn't have another day? What is that one day? What are you going to do one day at a time? And, maybe sounds really cliche as I'm saying it, or like a fortune cookie, but it's true. Like, you got now, and maybe that's all. Sometimes I don't even say I got it. What am I going to get through today? I'm saying, in the next 10 minutes, I just have to get here. In the next 10 minutes, I just have to get here. And, sometimes you have to break it down to like the smallest part to move through, but that's okay, because that's those perfect moments, that's how you live. So anyway.
Absolutely. That is how you live. It's so interesting on my journey now. A lot of the work that I'm doing around my brain and disassociation is around cortisol and adrenaline and all of those things that affect the body and the brain that keep me in that state of not being present. And it's been really, really powerful to watch, just writing something down, talking to a friend, going for a walk, doing all the artistic things that we're doing just for me, just for the moment, have really helped to shift me getting out of my brain and out of that expectation around except for last night. Let me tell you this, I was up all night worried about my son's teeth and how I don't brush them enough, and how we are going to have to deal with cavities tomorrow. You know what I mean? It's just like I couldn't get out of it until I called my sister crying this morning, just to be like talk to another mom, to be like, Ariel, chill, let's go hang out and do something fun, right? To get into that play moment. It's just so easy to not. It's so easy to go in the mind when you have a disease of the mind, right? And you have trauma and you have those things. So thank you for sharing that. I do want to shout out to, we have some OG Simpson fans, Hank. I'm sure you knew they were coming. I'm sure you knew they were here. And so they're really curious about how that work environment shift and even your writing content shifted for the show as you journeyed deeper into your recovery.
Well, I don't write it. More brilliant minds than mine write it. So it really, for me on The Simpsons, was about my own relationship to my work. The Simpsons being a large part of that. I would say that the real answer to that question is in recovery, from alcoholism, from codependency, from others. At first, my work takes a step back. It's just my journey, where I get very freaked out. I'm very anxious and very feeling my feelings, and not in a way that makes it easy for me to be effective as an artist. But that's just temporary. That's a fake I can't go for. I have to kind of breathe through that, feel through that, express myself through that. And I'm not saying I didn't do a good job as motor bartender when I was in early sobriety. I did, I did my episode. But as an artist, as somebody who worked on Simpsons or anything else, it eventually, at first it made me very anxious, and it was harder to concentrate. And then as things settled and I got out of that hallway and started discovering what was at the other end of that hallway, if I wasn't drinking or using or obsessed with somebody else, I discovered parts of myself that where I had numbed. you know, an artist uses, as an actor is, right, paints his emotions, his feelings, his memories, his thoughts, and I was cut off from some of them without knowing it. It was a blind spot. It was a catch-22. I didn't know I was cut off because I'd never known it was accessible. But as I had more compassion for myself and others, I think that was probably the main thing. I was able to forgive myself and thus forgive others. And I felt like the stuff I was most ashamed of, my worst moments as an alcoholic, my worst moments as a codependent, all of a sudden I could share that, forgive myself for them, and an entire a huge pool of compassion for myself and others came up, which is pretty handy for an artist. And I'm sure that made its way into even Chief Wiggum's, some of his performance. I mean, whatever voices on The Simpsons, anything I was doing got filled in more, but I had to stay with that. That wasn't instantaneous.
Thank you, Hank. You didn't have to do that, but I know people are, that's blowing
Yeah,
up.
folks like, the kids like the voices.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Oh, wow. Okay, so we're kind of coming closer to the end, and I want to give everyone space to kind of talk about, you know, wrap up their final thoughts, anything that came to their mind, and ending kind of for me with the question, as creatives and in your work, what are you excited about? What's coming up for you in your life, in your recovery, in your art that you're super excited about right now?
I just spoke, but I'll say really quickly. I'm more and more drawn to art, theater, film, TV that expresses this. And I've started trying to create content that does the same. Working on a one-man show that talks about, it's called What's My Part? Double entendre, meaning who do I get to be as an actor? And also what's my responsibility? Who am I? How am I accountable in life? And I talk about how as a mimic, the upside of that, I could do it, and that's how I made my living, and all these voices. The darker side of that is I was desperate to be anyone but myself. I was dying to be somebody else. And I sort of made an art form out of that in a way, by talking like this, or talking like this, or talking like however. But in order to learn to really act, and as I was referring to before, be myself and fill in those performances, I had to be willing to share myself, my true self, with others, which deepened once I stopped using drugs and alcohol and other things. And that journey led to this APU realization I had. I can't talk about that without a recovery, in a recovery context. And I have to talk, I talk about it so much now in social justice rooms and seminars and personal appearances and this and that, I decided to do a one-man show about it. And also, Susan, you know, I was very moved. I asked myself on my 60th, I just turned 60, what would bring me joy? I never would sing or try to sing because I felt I could never be as good as that as I am at mimicking. So why really try? And I also been in professional circumstances were surrounded by such genius singers that why would I even dare to sing in front of these people? And I love Bruce Springsteen, always have. I imitated him vocally my whole life. Decided for my birthday to try to sing a few songs as Bruce, and found this strange side door into learning to sing, which I never tried before because I thought I couldn't do it, and discovered that I could learn it. And as beginner's mind, as you said, just said, well, I want to me, it was like I was learning just learn to imitate the boss, but it actually was learning to sing. It's given me such joy. And I probably will never sing as well as I, talk like G. Wiggum, but I can't tell you the joy it's brought me. I had no idea that was waiting for me to do that half as well as I do other things professionally. It's just filled my heart.
You know, you and I should sing together because I can sing like Bonnie Raitt. So we could do like a thing and it would be so good, right?
Are you ready for that thing called love, Susan?
That's right. Are you ready for the thing called love? Yeah, I got it. I got all the moves. I got everything. Yeah, I'm working on the voice, but I could do it. I could do it. And nothing without joy, right? That is like my motto. And that's a hard motto, but joy, the arts give you joy and catharsis and meaning, and joy is underrated, man. It just is. So I think joy.
Great.
Wonderful. Is that what you're excited about, Susan? More joy? Anything else?
Singing. I'm a singer.
Come on now. Yes.
I'm
John, what about you?
We're, in a very similar way, we're trying to work to get more recovery, I would say, friendly or forward plays out into the world. Because right now, the joke is like if someone's in recovery in a TV show, I promise you that they will relapse at the end of season 1. Like they only exist to be of danger to the rest of the world, to not be the 60 million people that we've heard about, right? So we're just trying to, and we have some fantastic theaters that have come forward to be able to program plays about it. And I just feel like we're at the beginning of this conversation shifting, that really just to see people living on stage in recovery, and it's not a plot point. I mean, at some point, we let the LGBT community stop talking about just coming out stories, and we let people of color stop talking about just trauma stories, but we have yet to let the recovery community stop talking about just rock bottom plays. Like that there has to be a next step where it's like, well, here's what it is, right? Like all of us got sober and then have to continue living our lives for decades afterwards. And none of that is represented in pop culture in any way. We only are at this one critical moment. And so what I'm excited about is writers that are in recovery putting it out there. I'm fascinated by and very supportive of writers not in recovery that want to write about the experience because they're interested in how that affects their characters or opens them up. And I'm thrilled about theaters finally programming plays where people just exist in recovery in the plays. And it's not, we talk about artists, it's like, it's got to be, Tennessee Williams is the only kind of like drunk artist that we know, right? It's only people that are brilliant and will probably put a shotgun in their mouth at some point, but that's part of the deal that they made. So to be able to say that people live in recovery and are represented on stage and are represented in TV like that is a cultural shift that I'm excited for our country to embrace, because we haven't done it yet, but it feels like we are right at that moment where it's about to happen.
Fantastic. And Susan, I'm sure you have more that you're excited about too, right? I think I cut you off a little bit.
No, that's okay. I mean, I'm listening to what Sean's saying about kind of almost that archetypal stereotype, and so what's more, how does the story continue? And artists have always understood the power of the arts to heal. And I think that science is really catching up with the artist and understanding what are those mechanisms and functions and structures, and how do things like something like, how often an art's done, or how do you understand what the personalization of an art is for recovery or for symptom relief or for other kinds of things. And I'm really excited about the marriage of arts and sciences, because I think that's where we start to create something that also hasn't been there. It's another layer of the story. It's not just, oh, arts and sciences are different, or arts and sciences do different things, but how do they come together? And the way we're going to solve all of the individual at a micro and macro level, and so much complexity and sadness and trauma, I think, is by coming together. And so I think science and arts share more than they don't, but they do it in different, they bring different talents, right? So I'm really excited about that.
Fantastic. So am I. Thank y'all so much for this amazing conversation. Thank you for the time. And for me, just hearing what all of y'all are saying, to think and dream of a world where, just even in my own experience, that I can just be me, that I can be the light of my experience. And for that to be the loudest narrative in our fields, in our creativity, for that to be what we really study. We can talk more about our culture and what life has given us, our recovery has given us, that part of the story to be the loudest narrative, that's power. And I'm so grateful for all of your work that you're doing. I speak on behalf of SAMHSA, I speak on behalf of the folks in the room, and sorry that we didn't get to all of your questions. They're amazing, but thank you. Thank you so much for just doing you, you know, and I think that's what I really got out of that. That's right size, you expressing your truth, not just for yourselves, but for all of us. I look forward to hearing more about it and being a part of it. All right, we're gonna kick it over to Kristen to wrap us up, my dear, dear friend, and for her to close us out.
Great.
Kristen,
Thank
you're
you.
up.
Thank you, Erin. Let's give everybody, give Erin a hand. Just amazing job. Thank you so much, Erin. My panelists, amazing. I could not express my gratitude more than just thank you again. Some of you have been a part of my life since I started drinking at 10 years old, after getting home from school and hitting my mom's bottle, sitting down in front of The Simpsons to just chill out. So this has been very special for me to kind of full circle moment and now share a recovery space and just be really excited about the future of what the recovery field is doing. So I'm going to put the evaluation to the webinar in the chat one more time. Please, 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 if you have time to take about 2 to 3 minutes to fill that out, that will help us improve our webinars for next recovery month. If you have any questions, want to get in touch with us, I will also put my email in the chat. And again, thank you so much for spending your afternoon with us, wherever you are in the world, and go out and create something. Thanks, everybody.